Welcome to the Inner Entrepreneur Podcast. These are the Inner Mentor series. Most of us have grown up to ignore our intuition, to ignore our gut. And particularly if we describe ourselves as successful entrepreneurs, successful business people, well, we're smart. We use the head. What's all this woo-woo, heart, gut, instinct stuff? Why would we bother with that? Well, give me a few minutes and I will give you 5 million reasons why you should pay very close attention to your gut. Uh, I believe our gut, our instinct, sixth sense, heart, whatever you want to call it, but this voice inside of you that speaks to you, but that we don't often listen to. Probably when we were very young, we paid close attention to, and then we get a little bit older and a little bit wise, a little bit smart. We said, no, I don't pay attention. So I use my head. I use my head. I don't connect to what's going on inside my body. But that is, in my experience, a big mistake. Your gut is always there to serve you, to give you the best guidance it possibly can. And I'm not saying you should ignore your head. I'm not saying you shouldn't think things through. I'm saying you should not ignore your gut. And best case, best decisions are made when you wrap both of them together. When you listen to the wisdom that your brain, your thinking has to offer, but you also pay attention to your gut. I said I would give you 5 million reasons. And so way back about 17 years ago, maybe 19 years ago, so probably 2007. It's a long time ago, and I can't remember the exact date. Anyway, it was in the midst of a global economic boom. Certainly in Ireland, the economy was booming. At the time, we called it the Celtic Tiger. If you're not Irish, you won't have heard that term. But basically, the Irish economy was roaring along. It was on steroids. And everyone was doing well. Everyone was making lots of money. It all seemed great. And we had no idea that this might come crashing to an end. Well, it did come crashing to an end. But that's for later on in the story. So around that time, I had two businesses, which was great. And the businesses were both connected to construction, and construction was booming in Ireland. So I was very much connected into this booming economy. It was all good. So we had two sizable warehouses. We kept all our stock, but business was growing, it was expanding. And for us to expand, it meant keeping more stock to supply to our local customers. And this commercial unit came up about 2 miles from where we're based. So this was good. This was going to be a really good place for us. And we decided we'd purchase it. Now, it was in excess of 5 million euro, which is a lot of money. But we decided we're going to buy it. And we did the analysis based on two things. Firstly, we were already a successful, cash-rich and profitable business. So it made sense to be reinvesting our profits, and we could afford to buy this building. The second thing was that we looked at what adding a third premises onto the other two we already have would add, the additional stock, the additional sales, and it seemed like this made sense for the expansion of our business. So when you did all the spreadsheets and thought through it all, you realized that this is a great decision for us. And so everything was a go. And this was late one afternoon. I'm sitting in my office. I think we were days away from actually signing and everything going ahead. Sitting in my office, I remember there was a couple of people in the office, and our auditor was on the speakerphone and having a conversation with him just to wrap up the final details. And I remember something he said to me. As we've gone through all the details and the meeting comes to the end, he says, "Paul, you can comfortably afford this." Now, something struck me in him saying that, because I remember thinking, well, there are 3 or 4 people in this conversation, but only one of them is going to have to carry the burden of the debt we will have to acquire to buy this business. And only one of them has to carry the burden of growing this business. So it did strike me that there was a responsibility I was taking on. But still, it was all good because, as he said, we could comfortably afford this and everything was stacking up. So that evening, it was a summer's evening, and I drove home. And as I got to my gates, I had to stop for a moment, reach for a little button I had, the press that would open the gates. And so I paused there for a moment. And as I drove through the gates, and thankfully I live in the countryside, a beautiful part of the country. And as I got past my house, I looked out and I could see over the ocean. And I paused there for a moment, reflective. And I thought to myself, Paul, you live in a beautiful home. You drive a beautiful car. Look at the view you have out of your house. But I thought, even more importantly, I thought to myself, what's inside that house is my family. A woman I love that I've now been married to for, well on 37 years, I think. We had 3 small children at the time. They're now 3 adults. And so I had a very happy family life, and I knew I was extraordinarily fortunate to live where I lived and to have the family I had. And I thought to myself, what more do you want? I mean, so if you double the size of your business, what more does it give you that's of value? I mean, it gives you ego things. Maybe it gives you a bigger car, maybe you look more successful. But what of those things that's of real actual value in your life, what will it give you? And my answer was quite clearly nothing. And a voice in my head says, then what the hell are you doing? Why would you raise 5 million euro in debt to buy a building, to expand the business when you already have everything that's of value in your life, everything you already need? And so it was just a moment of awareness. Now, there was no financial logical insight. It was just a deep moment of connection going, I live a blessed life and I don't have this level of debt on the business. I had no debt on the business. Why would I take this on? How would it benefit me? How would it make my life better? And when I looked at the things in my life that were actually of value to me, it wasn't going to make them better. In fact, it might have made them worse. So I made the decision at that moment because a voice in my head is going, are you freaking crazy? And I thought to myself, yeah, I am. I'm crazy to do this. We'd planned it for 6 months, so it all seemed to make sense, but I knew I would be crazy to do it. Anyway, next morning, I drive back into the office and I start telling people, look, the deal, I'm out. It's not happening. Few people pissed off by it. Mostly those were people who are going to make some money out of this. So I'm talking bankers, some legal people, the agent for the property, all these sort of people, a little bit miffed. Dr. John DeMartini calls it the law of lesser pissers. And he says often there will be someone pissed off and you have a choice between you being pissed off and somebody else being pissed off. Go for someone else being pissed off. I wasn't deliberately setting out to piss someone off, and I don't think that's what DeMartini is suggesting. What he's saying is that you have to connect your own values. You have to connect for what's right and what's true for you. And when you do that, if other people don't like it, then other people don't like it. That's a fact. But you can't become the one that's pissed off, living a life that you're not supposed to live to keep other people happy. So anyway, people were pissed off, but I knew what was right for me. So that if that was just the full story, it would be an interesting story of how I made a decision not to spend 5 million euro based on a gut instinct. And I think there would be a lot in that story just by itself, but that's not the whole story. The story gets much more interesting because probably within 6 months of that, and I can't remember the exact times and dates, it's a long time ago, but probably within about 6 months of that, the world economy began to collapse and we entered into the global financial crisis. And so lots of the big businesses, banks in Ireland, are under huge trouble. But, names like Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, Fannie Mae, the big companies like these started going out of business, looking for the government to support them. They say that when the world economy catches sneezes, the Ireland catches a cold because we're such a small economy. And we did catch a cold. That Celtic tiger that was Ireland's booming economy became a pussycat, really. Businesses start closing down. For sale signs start coming up in properties that nobody could buy. Banks started calling in on debt. And my own business fell by 55%. It was extremely difficult. I had to let people go. I had to put people on 3-day weeks. And, looking back, we survived that level of fall off in our profits and sales in our business, which is extremely challenging. But the more challenging thing is you don't know where it's going to stop. It's like going down the black ski slope. You don't know where the end is. So when I got to 55% and I shaved everything away and I had the business just surviving, I actually didn't know whether or not it would continue going. Or would I go with a business? Would I lose everything? So very, very stressful. And for us as a business, that lasted about 3 years of really hard work just trying to keep the business going. And then the economy picked up. Now, it took a long time for property prices to recover, and it took a long time for the banks to stabilize in Ireland anyway. But the interesting thing is, I remember as we began to emerge into a better economy, I remember I would go to dinner parties with my wife. And this was a really interesting story because the whole story of the economic crash was so relevant in Ireland at the time. There were miserable stories and everyone was affected by it. And I would relate the story. I got a really interesting reaction from people. They'd go, Paul, you were so clued in. You were so smart, so clever. You saw it was coming. Bullshit. I hadn't got a clue. I mean, I really was as clueless as pretty much everybody. My businesses were booming, all was good for me. I was flying along, profits are coming in, and I had no notion that this was going to come to literally a screaming halt. No idea. So it wasn't that I was clever, smart, none of those things. What saved me was I listened to my gut. And so I do think now of what would have happened if that day I'd ignored my gut. If I'd gone to my gates and said, don't be silly, this is a great business idea. I know you've done that because I've done that on many, many occasions where my gut has been saying, Paul, don't do this. My mind has overruled it. I have made some stupid, very costly business decisions when my mind thought it was a great idea, but some part of me, again, I say my gut, my heart, my nervous system, but in my body, something was saying, it's just not comfortable with this. It just doesn't feel right. But I pushed it aside. I ignored it. Maybe that's what I've been trained to do going up. It's not about feelings. It's about logic. I'm a businessman. That's how I think. And so I've pushed many of those feelings away and had some disasters. Thankfully, disasters that I was able to recover from. I had no €5 million disasters. And I look back and I realized that had I not made that decision, I would have gone into serious financial trouble. I would have not been able to pay back that debt. The building would have been empty because no one was buying anything. I wouldn't have had the resources to fill it with stock. The economy was so down. Construction was down. Nothing was being built. I would have been on my knees with this massive debt with a building I couldn't sell from, I didn't need, I didn't want. My business would have crashed without, the banks would have closed us down. I have no doubt about that. Maybe I would have lost my home. Maybe it would have destroyed me financially. Maybe I would not have recovered to the level of financial comfort I have today. Maybe it would have taken me so long to recover from that I would still be struggling today. I also wonder how would it have impacted on my mental health, my emotional health, my physical health. Would I have had a heart attack and died? I don't know. But I realized that simple decision, that simple moment of connecting and listening to my gut, I say now it saved my life, it saved my business, but it really did save my life. I share these experiences so that you might, I say, I like to say 5 million reasons why you should listen to your gut, but I really do. The lesson I took away from that was that my gut, my instinct, it is there to serve me, which is not saying I don't use my head. I do, of course, but it's there to protect me. And my feeling is it's almost always right. If it tells you don't go into a situation, don't connect with a certain person, it is almost always right. I don't know when it has let me down. And I would say if you take a moment now and just think through the past, think about some of the good decisions you made. Did they feel good? Was your intuition guiding you? Think of some of the lousy, stupid decisions you made. Were you ignoring your gut? So my call to you is that you take some time to ponder that and you learn the lesson that I did without financial disaster. So for me, it's very, very simple now. I know my gut is always trying to serve me. I know I can't always trust my mind because my mind is sometimes connected to ego and it's, this will be great. You're not necessarily conscious of it, but sometimes your mind is just not serving you. I've had so many examples of this with clients I've worked with. So the lesson I've learned to myself is I always listen to my gut. I don't ignore my head, but I always listen to my gut. And if you were to take one thing away from this short episode, is that your gut is there to serve you. Always listen to it. If you're saying, no, it's not speaking to me, I will come back and go, yes, it's speaking to you. You're not listening and you need to practice listening. And the listening is in the pause. I always think of that moment when my gate slowly opened. I had to stop the car and pause. And if they were open that day and I'd raced in, maybe I would have never had that moment of pause. So the real lesson and the opportunity in this is to pause for a moment and go, what's going on inside and how is it guiding me? I think if you ask that question, it will save you from a lot of chaos, a lot of disaster, and hopefully lead you to some really excellent and powerful life choices. I hope you've taken some value from this. And if you have, you might think of just one other person who might also value from hearing this episode and send it on to them, because that's really how the podcast grows. And also, if there's something that really resonates with you and you'd like to have a deeper conversation about it, I'm going to put a link in the show notes and you'll be able to apply to book a discovery call there if that's something you'd like to do. Thank you. Until next time.